If you have passed your 65th birthday and struggle to stand up from a seating position and sit down again more than 11 times within 30 seconds, your likelihood of experiencing a severe fall is steadily rising. Here is the uncomfortable reality that few healthcare providers speak about openly. That specific score has significantly less to do with your cardiac health, your cholesterol markers, or your systemic blood pressure than it does with a single factor most people overlook, which is your lower body strength. Lower body power, rather than cardiovascular endurance, serves as the most accurate predictor of how many self-sufficient years remain ahead of you. Stay engaged with this explanation because I am going to walk you through 6 everyday dietary choices and a single half-minute assessment you can perform at a standard dining chair that can begin reversing those numbers. It includes the 78-year-old who lost balance while stepping out to the driveway. It is the individual who lost traction exiting their vehicle, or the one whose leg collapsed on the stairwell. The underlying physical baseline behind nearly all these incidents is not an ailing heart, but rather depleted leg musculature. In a long-term clinical study monitoring seniors over age 70, the participants demonstrating the lowest leg strength scores ended up requiring long-term care assistance within 5 years at roughly 3.5 times the rate of the highest-performing group. Consider that reality for a moment, as it represents more than triple the overall risk profile. This outcome did not stem from an acute coronary event or a brain ischemia. Their legs simply lacked the force necessary for basic daily weight-bearing tasks, and a single ground impact determined the rest. So prior to discussing a single nutritional strategy, I want you to actively determine where your physical function currently stands. Quite literally, this represents the exact assessment that emergency physicians and physical rehabilitation specialists rely upon routinely. It forms a core element of standard clinical fall prevention protocols, and you can execute it immediately while following along. Locate a firm chair, the style that will not slide under pressure, and place its back flat against a wall. Sit directly in the middle with your feet flat on the floor, crossing your arms tightly across your chest so you cannot push off using your hands. Now rise to a complete standing position and return to a full sit, repeating this motion as many times as possible within 30 seconds. Keep an exact count of your completed repetitions. Here is precisely how to interpret your resulting score. For the majority of individuals in their 60s, a score falling between 12 and 14 represents the general baseline. For individuals in their early 70s, that target shifts closer to 12. By your late 70s, the baseline drops to around 10 or 11. If your completed count fell significantly below those age-adjusted markers, you belong to the demographic where balance incidents and loss of physical independence begin appearing most frequently. Conversely, if your result landed slightly above those numbers, you possess a larger functional reserve than you might realize. Record your exact number on a notepad where you can reference it later, because we will revisit this baseline at the end, and I want you to retest yourself in a few weeks. Here is the additional structural benefit to this method. The evaluation protocol itself functions as an exceptionally effective strengthening movement. The most impactful exercise for preserving aging lower body tissue is the exact motion you just executed. Rising unassisted from a seated position directly targets the primary muscle groups required to lift you off a low surface, navigate out of an automobile, or push up off the floor. Therefore, the action plan remains straightforward. Once every day, perform that exact same chair stand sequence. Do not worry about timing 30 seconds. Simply complete 3 controlled sets of 5 repetitions each. Space them out through your morning, afternoon, and evening routines. That adds up to roughly 30 seconds of total physical effort distributed throughout your day. Now, some of you may have logged a score low enough that reaching 11 repetitions feels entirely unattainable right now. I do not want you to internalize that result as a personal failure or an impossible barrier. If executing the movement completely hands-free is currently out of reach, use your arms for initial support. If a standard seat height proves too challenging, begin by placing a firm cushion to elevate the surface. A complete repetition performed with a slight armrest push still generates beneficial mechanical strain and builds tissue capacity. You are not trying to achieve an arbitrary gold standard today. You are simply striving for a single additional repetition beyond where your physical baseline sits right now. I suspect those results caught a few of you off guard in one direction or the other. That is a positive outcome because now these dietary recommendations hold practical value. Rather than reading like another generic list of health tips you passively digest and forget, here is the underlying mechanism that makes this entire framework effective. This represents the critical step that most health commentators completely skip over. Consuming specific foods in isolation will never rebuild lost muscle tissue on its own. It is biologically impossible. Dietary protein serves as the raw structural block. However, muscle tissue only lays down new structural material when you provide a clear mechanical stimulus to do so. That stimulus comes exclusively from physical loading and movement. Therefore, every single food option mentioned moving forward comes paired with a specific timing window tied to physical exertion, even if that exertion consists solely of this chair movement, because combining the two achieves a biological result that neither can produce independently. Now, why does this strength decline occur in otherwise healthy and cautious individuals in the first place? Starting around our fourth decade, we naturally lose small amounts of skeletal muscle, and after age 60, that process accelerates noticeably. As a result, the average adult loses a substantial fraction of functional tissue every 10 years without ever noticing a shift on a standard bathroom scale. Functional force output declines even faster than overall muscle volume. Reflect on that distinction for a second. You can maintain the exact same silhouette in the mirror while growing measurably weaker with each passing year. On top of that loss of mass, a second physiological hurdle compounds the issue over time. As the body ages, its capacity to synthesize dietary protein into functional muscle fibers becomes increasingly inefficient. Clinicians refer to this internal slowdown as anabolic resistance. Picture an aging supply delivery truck operating on a tight schedule. In your early 30s, that truck delivered its entire cargo directly to the cellular loading bay with virtually zero lost material. By your 70s, that same transport loses nearly a third of its payload along the route before ever reaching the facility. The raw building materials were dispatched, but the metabolic destination never receives enough usable signal to keep production moving efficiently. That explains why conscientious individuals can eat reasonable amounts of protein and still experience a steady decline in physical baseline year after year. This is not a failure of personal discipline or effort. Your body simply requires a higher density of specific nutrients delivered at optimal structural windows. Consequently, we are going to categorize these 6 specific foods by the 3 primary jobs required to repair and maintain leg strength. These jobs involve sending the primary signaling prompt, providing continuous nutrient availability throughout rest periods, and ensuring efficient biological delivery directly to the targeted muscle fibers. Let us begin with the initial signal, because if the chemical instruction to build tissue never reaches the target, no other step matters. The single most potent signaling food available to you happens to be the exact item older adults were historically warned to avoid: whole eggs, specifically including the yolk rather than just the whites. For decades, seniors were instructed to discard egg yolks over blood lipid concerns. That outdated guidance caused measurable harm to muscle preservation because virtually all the key micronutrients a muscle relies on are concentrated within that yolk. A whole egg supplies every essential amino acid your body requires in an ideal physiological ratio, serving as the gold standard protein metric against which all other sources are measured. Additionally, it represents one of the rare natural dietary sources that delivers active vitamin D alongside that high-quality amino acid profile. That specific pairing carries far more biological importance than it might seem, because your muscle cells contain dedicated vitamin D receptors embedded within their tissue structures, and optimal vitamin D status directly correlates with improved lower body strength and lower fall rates among older populations. Furthermore, eggs contain high levels of choline, which supports the key neurotransmitters responsible for sending nerve impulses down to the muscle fibers. Thus, a single whole food simultaneously supports both the structural muscle tissue and the underlying neural wiring required to activate it. I recommend consuming 2 whole eggs most mornings, prepared poached or soft-boiled rather than fried at high temperatures in butter, and eating them within roughly an hour of performing light movement. Even completing a brief walk around your living space ensures that signaling cascade hits while the muscle tissue is actively receptive to nutrient uptake. Pairing those eggs with a side of dark leafy greens like spinach allows the healthy fats in the yolk to dramatically improve your absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins contained in those vegetables. The two food choices work synergistically to enhance each other's nutritional value. The second primary signaling choice is Greek yogurt, specifically the dense traditional strained variety. The specific driver behind this selection is a crucial amino acid called leucine. Think of leucine as the primary biological switch that triggers muscle tissue synthesis. It directly activates the cellular pathways that function like the site manager on a construction
If an insufficient
project.
amount of leucine reaches that cellular manager, the entire construction crew remains idle, regardless of how many supply trucks full of raw materials are idling nearby. Here is the key operational difference for older adults. Mature muscle tissue requires a noticeably higher concentration of leucine to flip that metabolic switch compared to younger tissue profiles. That precise mechanism explains why haphazardly snacking on low-protein items throughout the day fails to preserve muscle after age 60. A single serving of plain Greek yogurt comfortably clears that required leucine threshold in an easily digestible form. Because it undergoes traditional fermentation, it simultaneously nourishes gut microbes associated with lower systemic inflammation. It is also gentle on a reduced morning appetite, which brings us directly to the most critical, yet frequently ignored operational rule in this entire video. This strategy requires zero extra financial expense, relies on no special products, and comes down entirely to strategic timing. That cellular leucine switch requires a minimum threshold of roughly 25 to 30 grams of high-tenacity protein delivered within a single meal. Here is where the standard modern diet fails older adults. Most individuals consume almost zero protein at breakfast, a minimal amount at lunch, and then attempt to load their entire daily protein requirement into their evening meal. To an aging muscle system, that pattern provides only one single building signal over a 24-hour period. The effective solution is to distribute that intake evenly throughout the day. Aim to hit that 25 to 30 gram intake mark across each of your 3 main meals, rather than concentrating it exclusively at dinner. Consuming 2 whole eggs alongside a serving of Greek yogurt at breakfast easily hits your primary protein goal early in the day, providing multiple cellular building signals instead of a single late-day spike. Numerous clinical trials focusing on older populations confirm that maintaining an even protein distribution makes the absolute difference between preserving functional muscle and experiencing steady tissue decline. Now, I recognize that some individuals simply do not experience a robust appetite early in the morning. Begin with a single egg and a few spoonfuls of yogurt to establish the habit. The objective is not to consume a massive meal, but rather to send your muscle tissue its initial repair signal before midday. The third key signaling food often catches people off guard, and a few viewers might initially resist the idea, which is entirely understandable. Beef liver, so stay open to the rationale, because it solves a specific physiological limitation that other foods cannot address. A muscle fiber can only produce functional force if it receives a clear, uninterrupted signal from the nervous system telling it to contract. That vital neural pathways network relies heavily on adequate vitamin B12 availability. Whole liver remains one of the most nutrient-dense biological sources of B12 found anywhere in nature. Here is why that specific micronutrient becomes so vital as time goes on. Beyond age 60, stomach acid production naturally drops, and your digestive system requires that acidic environment to successfully detach B12 from dietary protein. As a consequence, a surprising percentage of older adults live with undetected low-grade B12 deficiencies that never show up on routine basic lab panels. Imagine an electrical switch connected to a worn, compromised wire. The light fixture itself remains fully intact, but the electrical signal traveling down that damaged line flickers inconsistently. That interruption causes the light to falter rather than illuminate reliably. That exact mechanism accounts for a significant portion of muscle weakness that gets incorrectly dismissed as a normal consequence of aging, when it actually stems from compromised nerve transmission. Liver also provides a highly bioavailable form of heme-iron, which your circulatory system requires to manufacture hemoglobin and deliver oxygen to working leg muscles. A modest 3 to 4 ounce portion consumed once a week, gently seared with onions, is more than sufficient to support those biological pathways. One important clinical note to consider carefully: if you currently take blood-thinning medications or manage a condition involving iron overload, consult your managing physician before adding organ meats to your routine, as they deliver an exceptionally concentrated nutrient density. That covers the primary signaling components. Now we turn to continuous fuel availability, specifically the sustained nutrient supply your body requires during extended sleep windows, which represents a time frame most people leave completely unaddressed. This option sits near the top of the list for unexpected food choices, yet it sits quietly in refrigerator doors across the nation. Standard cottage cheese. The specific driver here is a slow-digesting milk protein known as casein. Fast-acting protein sources function much like a sudden heavy rainstorm on dry soil, creating a quick surface runoff before a deep penetration can occur. Casein functions like a steady, low-intensity overnight rainfall that slowly soaks deep into the soil over many hours. Here is why that slow-release profile matters so profoundly for maintaining leg muscle integrity. A major portion of tissue repair and cellular recovery takes place while you sleep, yet most older adults go 8 or more hours without any circulating amino acids to support those structural processes. Consuming a slow-digesting protein before going to sleep maintains a steady trickle of amino acids feeding your muscle fibers throughout the night, preventing your body from breaking down existing tissue during extended fasting windows. Consuming roughly 3/4 to a full cup of low-sodium cottage cheese 30 to 60 minutes before bed provides that sustained baseline. Adding a small handful of chopped walnuts introduces healthy fats that further slow the digestive process, extending that steady nutrient delivery straight through the night while your body works to repair daily wear. Now let us address the third critical objective, which is efficient biological delivery. You can successfully initiate the cellular signal and supply ample building blocks, but if those nutrients cannot reach the target muscle tissue, the entire effort falls short. Two specific foods work to clear the primary biological obstacles that impede efficient nutrient transport. The first major obstacle is persistent low-grade systemic inflammation, sometimes referred to in clinical research as inflammaging. This subtle chronic inflammation represents one of the main reasons muscle tissue stops responding effectively to routine nutrition and physical activity as we grow older. It essentially interferes with the chemical pathways that instruct muscle fibers to synthesize new protein and repair microdamage. Wild-caught salmon stands out as an exceptional choice here because its rich concentration of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, works directly to damp down that systemic inflammatory response. In clinical trials involving adults over 60, regular omega-3 intake measurably enhanced how efficiently muscle tissue responded to incoming dietary protein. Therefore, salmon addresses both sides of the physiological equation simultaneously. It supplies high-quality structural amino acids while actively reducing the background inflammation that prevents your body from utilizing those nutrients efficiently. Consuming 2 servings per week, roughly 4 ounces each, baked or gently pan-seared in olive oil, provides optimal benefits. Avoid heavy deep-frying methods, however, as extreme high-temperature oil processing degrades the delicate fatty acid structures you are seeking to obtain. Consuming this meal within a few hours of completing a light walk catches your leg muscles in a prime state, ready to pull in those circulating nutrients. That post-meal walk provides far greater functional value than most people realize. Taking a 10-minute walk immediately following a meal accomplishes 2 vital physiological goals at once. It increases peripheral circulation down into your lower extremities while simultaneously pulling excess glucose out of your bloodstream without requiring heavy insulin spikes. In environments heavily reliant on vehicles, maintaining a consistent daily walking habit can take some deliberate effort. Create versatile movement options for yourself regardless of the setting. Walk laps around your backyard or pace the main aisles during a routine trip to the grocery store. Walking inside climate-controlled shopping centers remains a popular option among older adults for good reason. It provides a level, warm, and secure surface when outdoor walkways are covered in ice or wet leaves. Suboptimal weather conditions do not mean you skip your physical movement. They simply mean you shift your physical activity indoors. The second major barrier to proper nutrient delivery involves your vascular infrastructure. Over time, the microscopic blood vessels that supply oxygen and nutrients to your lower body muscles can become stiff and less responsive, behaving like an old garden hose that has hardened after years of exposure. Consequently, oxygenated blood and essential nutrients flow into the surrounding muscle tissue at a much slower rate. Lentils help address this vascular stiffness through a rich content of the amino acid arginine, which your body utilizes to synthesize nitric oxide. Nitric oxide serves as the primary signaling molecule that signals smooth arterial walls to relax and expand. Expanding those vascular pathways ensures that a higher percentage of the nutrients you consume actually reaches the precise muscle fibers that require them. Furthermore, lentils supply a clean source of complex carbohydrates alongside significant dietary fiber, giving your legs a steady, long-lasting energy supply rather than triggering a rapid blood sugar spike followed by a crash. Consuming roughly 3/4 of a cup of cooked lentils 4 or 5 times a week in warm soups or alongside roasted vegetables works exceptionally well. Pairing them with foods rich in vitamin C, such as sliced bell peppers or fresh tomatoes, significantly increases the amount of non-heme iron your body absorbs from the lentils. Before wrapping up this comprehensive guide, I must address one widespread misconception that quietly undermines many people's health efforts. You cannot simply eat your way out of an established severe vitamin D deficiency. While options like salmon and whole eggs certainly contribute to your intake, dietary sources alone rarely resolve an underlying structural deficiency. Here is the reality that often gets overlooked in basic nutrition discussions. Approximately 25% of American adults maintain inadequate vitamin D levels. That rate climbs even higher as we age and spend less time getting direct sunlight exposure. Because optimal vitamin D levels directly influence lower body muscular force and overall balance control, knowing your actual laboratory value is well worth the effort. Fortunately, obtaining this information is straightforward and often comes with zero out-of-pocket cost. For individuals enrolled in Medicare, the standard annual wellness visit carries no copay, yet a large percentage of beneficiaries never take advantage of it. Schedule that appointment and specifically request a 25-hydroxy vitamin D blood test alongside a B12 level assessment. Record those specific lab markers directly next to your chair stand count on your notepad. That single lab evaluation will clearly indicate whether you are building your physical mobility on a solid structural foundation or on shaky ground. Finally, I cannot provide you with a nutritional plan and a physical movement screen without clearly identifying which lower body symptoms indicate something far different than simple muscular weakness. A few specific warning signs represent acute medical emergencies that require immediate intervention, yet people often try to rationalize them away. If you experience sudden weakness or numbness restricted to one leg, particularly when accompanied by facial asymmetry or speech difficulty, that presentation matches a stroke profile. Do not delay action, do not attempt to monitor the situation at home, and do not drive yourself to a facility. Contact emergency medical services immediately because paramedics can initiate critical diagnostic and therapeutic steps directly inside the ambulance during transport. Similarly, if one calf becomes noticeably swollen, warm to the touch, and painfully tender on its own, those signs can point to a deep vein blood clot. Do not attempt to massage the muscle or walk through the discomfort to clear it out. That scenario warrants an urgent same-day evaluation by your primary physician or a visit to an emergency department. Additionally, if you have experienced 2 or more actual falls or near-fall incidents over the preceding 12 months, even if no obvious injury resulted, that history alone justifies a formal medical evaluation this week. The majority of strategies detailed in this guide focus on gradual, cumulative physical improvements over time. Those 3 specific scenarios demand rapid, immediate action. Recognizing the distinction between age-related weakness and acute medical events is a vital aspect of protecting your long-term health. Consider the experience of Dale, a 76-year-old retired postal carrier living outside Kansas City. He walked outdoor delivery routes for over 3 decades and assumed his lower body strength would naturally persist indefinitely, right up until a cold winter morning. He reached for the handrail on his own front porch steps and suddenly realized he lacked the leg power to ascend them without pulling himself up with his arms. On his initial chair stand assessment, he completed just 8 repetitions. We avoided complex or overwhelming intervention protocols. He simply added 2 whole eggs and a serving of Greek yogurt to his morning routine so his daily protein was no longer heavily skewed toward dinner.
He incorporated salmon twice weekly, added cottage cheese before bed, and consistently performed the chair stand movement each morning while waiting for his coffee to brew. 4 months into this subtle routine adjustment, his completed chair stand score rose to 14 repetitions. However, the outcome he was most eager to share had nothing to do with the numerical test score itself. It was the newfound ability to carry both bags of heavy groceries up his front porch steps in a single effortless trip. That was a task he had quietly given up a year prior without mentioning the struggle to anyone. To synthesize this entire operational approach into its core elements, your lower body muscle tissue requires three basic inputs. It needs the initial biological signal to build, a continuous supply of fuel across rest periods, and clear vascular pathways to ensure delivery. Whole eggs, Greek yogurt, and beef liver supply the initial build signal, and distributing your intake evenly across all 3 daily meals ensures that metabolic switch gets activated repeatedly throughout the day. Cottage cheese consumed prior to sleep maintains a steady trickle of amino acids straight through the overnight recovery window. Wild salmon and lentils help clear vascular and inflammatory barriers, so those building blocks actually reach the targeted tissue. Yet none of those nutritional strategies will rebuild a single muscle fiber unless you consistently give the tissue a physical reason to adapt, which is why that simple chair movement remains your primary starting point. If you retain only one core concept from this discussion, let it be this principle. Proper nutrition loads the mechanical system, but physical movement pulls the trigger. You absolutely require both working in tandem to see real functional changes. Let me speak with complete transparency regarding why I compiled this detailed protocol in the first place. This discussion is not truly about the specific nutritional metrics of salmon or cottage cheese. It is fundamentally about where your physical baseline sits on a random weekday 5 years down the road. It is about whether you will be the individual comfortably navigating your own porch steps unassisted or the person waiting at the bottom for someone else to provide physical support. It determines whether you continue driving yourself to routine appointments independently or whether you have to forfeit that personal mobility entirely. That is the actual outcome being decided by your daily habits right now. A gradual decline in leg strength rarely makes a loud, sudden appearance. It quietly chips away at your daily functional choices one by one until the physical environment presents a hurdle you can no longer clear independently. The reassuring reality is that the recovery process operates under the exact same biological rules in reverse. Restoring your physical strength quietly restores those daily personal freedoms one at a time. You notice a more stable physical footprint, a more confident pivot, and the ability to handle an armload of groceries without pause. You feel those internal functional improvements long before any formal clinical assessment measures them. Here is your single concrete action step for the coming week. Complete the simple chair stand assessment once every day, record your count accurately, and note your starting baseline result today. Reassess your performance in 4 weeks to track your physical trajectory. That is the entire initial requirement. Avoid trying to completely overhaul your entire kitchen environment overnight. Select just 2 manageable adjustments to begin with right away. Incorporate a dedicated protein source into your morning routine, and introduce a modest portion of cottage cheese before going to sleep at night. Allow those initial changes to become automatic habits before layering on additional steps. A loss of lower body strength is by no means an inevitable, permanent condition, regardless of whether you are 62 or 92 years old. I have personally guided far too many individuals through successful physical turnarounds to ever view lower body weakness as an unchangeable outcome. Maintaining your residence, navigating your stairs, operating your vehicle, keeping pace with younger family members, and opening your front door without needing a wall for support represent the real-world activities your legs carry every day. If someone in your life has been moving more cautiously on the stairs recently, forward this information to them and invite them to complete the chair assessment alongside you. Finally, leave a comment below sharing the single personal activity you would most hate to lose the ability to perform independently on your own 2 feet, as I review every response and use your insights to guide future educational content.